What's going on, everyone? Today we're going to be talking about how to PR for your next half marathon or race. But first, I want to shout out in vivo. I want to shout out everybody at the gym. If you ran, if you came to support, I mean, it was just, in my opinion, as a gym owner, as a trainer, as a coach, being able to see everyone's be supportive of one another, being able to push each other, and finally get to the end and see everyone cross that line was really rewarding. I mean, I obviously went to go run my PR and something that I wanted to achieve, but just seeing everyone else win was way more gratifying than whatever decided to do. So I just want to shout out everybody that did run this race. It was really special, special to me for me to see it. And as coaches, we just want our clients and our members to be able to not only succeed inside the gym but outside the gym and see how those things impact your personal life and how it impacts other people. First, I want to talk about a little bit of the recap with the Miami race and what challenges are you going to face if you're running something like the Miami half marathon. First, I would say is humidity. This is such a big portion of running that a lot of people don't take in consideration. When you're preparing, you have to really understand where you're located at, because depending on your location, your environment is really going to have a big toll and effect on your performance. A lot of times people do the mistake of having to train when the sun is out, and especially in Miami, you think that training when the sun is out, maybe you'll have a better day, that it's not as hot, or it's not as humid, but you're still going to deal with those factors. So you have to think about, are you going to run in a place that has a lot of shade? Are you going to run in a place where you have a lot of traffic involved, right? So all these things are part of your training regimen, but there are considerations as well. So what happens in half marathon training or marathon training is that people decide when they want to train. They either think about training early in the morning, maybe lunchtime if they have the ability to, or they'll find something to train at night. Now, the difficulty that comes with each one of these is how you feel. What I would say is that training early in the mornings, yes, you avoid the sun. But what's difficult to do training so early is you might not feel so recovered. Even if you get 8 to 9 hours of sleep, you're not gonna feel ready to get out of bed and go run 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. You're always thinking about beating the sun. The other thing that you have to take in consideration is what time of the year are you training, because if you're training in the time where your time saving time, and you think about the clock having to go back an hour, you're really gonna start seeing the difference within that hour change, right? Because typically you wake up and it's darker out, and that means you can maybe run a little bit later. But if the sun is coming out way earlier, now you have to take in consideration that the sun is coming out, so you have to wake up even earlier to do your runs, right? So this is a big consideration for that. The next thing that I would say is that although there is no sun in the morning, humidity is there. It's way more humid in the morning, early mornings, than it is when the sun comes out. And this might be a contributing factor for you to feel fatigue during your runs. You might have done 3 to 4 miles, and you start seeing that during that time, you're like, I don't know why my heart rate was so high. Well, it's because it's not as hot with the sun, but it is an oven in another sense, right? Humidity is definitely going to take a toll into this. So there's something to consider with that being said. The next thing I would say that you have to really focus on, if you're focusing mid evening runs, if you're running from 12 to 5 o'clock, is that you're going to have the factors that the sun is out, right? Everything is hot, right? So how do you properly prepare for that? And what I like to say is, if you're hydrating adequately enough and you make sure that you're constantly going to the bathroom, and then you know that you're hydrated, right? But it's not only hydrating a lot, because even if you hydrate a lot, let's say you drink half a gallon of water prior to your run that day, if you do this throughout the week, you have to understand that when you go use the restroom and you go pee, you're not just letting go of water, right? You're also getting rid of minerals. You're also getting rid of salt. And salt is a big component for you to stay hydrated. And not only that, for your muscles to be able to contract, and they need that salt. So this is why a lot of people implement adding salt packets like Element or Water Boy or those kind of salt packets into their hydration, so they can make sure that they feel sustainable throughout those runs. And lastly, I would say is the training in the afternoon, training at night. Um, the benefits to this is that it's not as humid and it's not as hot. But what you deal with is fatigue. You've been up all day. You've been working all day. Um, how your food sits in your stomach throughout the day is something else, right? So let's say you had a heavier lunch, or you ate something in the morning that you probably were in a rush to, and you ate something just to grab a bite, and it didn't sit in your stomach really well. Now you have all day to digest that. So you're running a little bit heavier at the end of the day. And that might be a big contributing portion or factor to how you're going to feel in those runs later on. So all these things, you have to really be mindful of how you're going to approach your runs, how you're going to implement training and nutrition together, because it's one thing to eat for aesthetics, for feeling every day, but there's another thing to eat to perform, and eating perform is completely different. You're not thinking about muscles from a standpoint of how many sets and repetitions do I need to do something for me to achieve this look. It's about how can I perform when I'm running, right? So these are all things that you want to take in consideration. So some of the most important parts of a run in the half marathon is understanding that you have to start waking up as early and getting practice of the time that you're going to be running. For example, the Miami Half Marathon started at 6:15 in the morning, but you also have to take in consideration that you have to drive there, you have to park, you have to make sure you do your warm-ups before the half marathon. So now you have to make up time for all of that. So if you're thinking that I can just get out of bed and I'm going to be an hour until I get there and avoid traffic and all that kind of stuff, you're already gonna cut it short, and it happened to a lot of us. It happened to me. I left my house around 4:30, and I still got traffic. And when I got there, I had to turn back around because there was lanes blocked off everywhere, and I took the wrong turn. So I had to get back into the highway, and by the time I got back into the highway, I had to basically jog to the start line. So that was my warm up, right? So considering all that kind of stuff, it's really important to understand that there has to be a proper plan and planification for you to make this achievable. What I would say, uh, there's a couple things that you might need to take in consideration, not only with weather, timing, what you're going to wear, but is also understanding the mindset for the half. I think a lot of people think about the half and they're like, man, it's 13.1 miles. Maybe you're trying to achieve running it under 2 hours, which, for example, that was my goal. My goal was to make it in under two. I have ran a half before under two. And I was really thinking about going for a PR, but at the same time, I'm thinking, I got to see how my body feels, right? Because I was waking up earlier in the prior days to get my circadian rhythm back into that timing. But I also took in consideration that if I'm going to be running that early, my digestive system also has to be ready to go, right? So if you wake up early, you also have to think, I need to also use the restroom before I run. So those are all things that you need to take in consideration. So make sure that you wake up earlier and get all your needs out of the way so you're properly prepared. I always like to say the night before you should have a bag with everything in a checklist to make sure that you touch up all the things you need to touch on, so you're not missing anything in the day of the race. I mentioned clothing. Clothing is a big factor for this, because if you're thinking about wearing those new shoes for you to run that race, it's probably not the best idea to wear those same exact shoes that you've never worn for the race, because you're thinking about breaking a new shoe into your race, which can change up your mechanics completely. So what I would recommend, always try to get a warm up mile for those shoes. And what I mean warm up mile, I mean warm up miles, not just 1 mile, but being able to incorporate it maybe 2 weeks prior to your training, do slow runs, maybe do a speed run, just to get accustomed to knowing how your foot is going to feel. Another thing that you consider is that what size of shoe are you going to wear? You might be typically a person that likes to have your feet a little bit snug because you like to run with a little propellant. So you like to feel like you can grip the ground. But the problem with this is that, yes, it feels good to feel like you could sprint, but the problem with that is that your feet can swell. So as you're running, your feet start to swell. And you think about, if you have really tight shoes, now you have tight shoes throughout maybe mile 8 all the way to 13, and that might be discomfort, right? So you don't want to deal with that portion as well. So these are all things you need to take in consideration. Um, Clothing, we talked about, obviously shoes, but also what are you running? If you are a person that you're constantly running in tights, then I would say run in tights because that's what you practice on. So always use the things you already practice with. Understanding that when you're running, there's going to be people handing you out gel packets. If you're not accustomed to taking the gel packs that they have, I always like to do a research to see what gel packs are going to be providing at the race, because if you go think about taking that gel pack and maybe it has some ingredients that your stomach might be a little bit more sensitive to, then that might be a factor throughout your race that you might not be thinking so much about now. But what happens if you take it mile 8 when you really need it, and now your body starts acting up, you have bubble guts, and that's the last thing you want to feel during a race. So I would say always bring the gel packets that you train with, or gel packets that you feel that you won't hit your stomach as hard, right? So those are things to take in consideration. There's water stations everywhere. The water stations, like I like to tell people, take advantage of the water stations, right? And the Gatorade stations, because although maybe you do 3 miles and you don't ever feel like you need to drink water, it's a half marathon, right? It's a longer run. So I would always say, even if you're not thirsty, try to get a little bit of water. Maybe rinse your mouth, make sure that you don't feel dehydrated, and then throughout the time and where they start giving out Gatorades, take what's adequate to you. You might not need to drink all the little bit of Gatorade that they give you. Maybe a rinse, swallow it a little bit, spit everything out. So understanding that you're still getting those sugar levels to be up and not being able to drop throughout the race, like it often happens when we're running long distance. Um, then the other thing is the mental component to this. And I pause and I think about this because I think the mental side is so important in training, and I think that often coaches don't really elaborate on this as much, and I wish more coaches would elaborate on this, because like I tell coaches and trainers, the way you go about training and the way you go be dedicated and motivated to go exercise, right? There might be different variables and factors for this, but when you go do training, you're also teaching people how to cope with the mechanism of pain, right? So you're learning how to understand that pain and how to use that pain moving forward. Now, there's a difference between pain and injury, right? So when you come to a race, how do you get to a point where, like, how can I work through this pain that I'm feeling right now? Well, it's a little bit difficult to kind of differentiate, and that's why I think that practice is really important. So getting often runs where you're gonna start seeing those mechanical injuries kind of come arise, right? So if you're a supinated runner, right? So if you're a supinated runner, you're gonna probably notice that there's gonna be more tightness on the TFL side. Maybe your knee might bother you on the lateral side. But if you have pronated feet and you pronate a lot, you're probably going to feel some plantar fasciitis, or you're going to start feeling a lot of Achilles pain, right? So you kind of build that plantar fascia, pain kind of radiate a little bit. Maybe your calves get really tight. So everyone has different mechanics, and all these things can play a big role in how you're going to feel. So it's important that we understand the difference between pain and injury, right? But in a race, how do I deal with the pain portion? I would tell you that most people feel like the wall or the pain barrier comes around mile 8 to 10, right? Because you probably practice up to 10 miles. You're not going to do 13 miles prior to a half marathon. You never do the full distance. You always train a little bit under. So like what we did as a gym, we trained all the way to 10 miles, and then we kind of deloaded, and then we had the final run. So what I like to say is that when you're working your way up and you start understanding your body, you might see that that injury might reappear. So you might have the plantar fasciitis pain come back again. But when you're running and you have a race of some sort, you know that you have people motivating you. You know that you have the beautiful scenery. It's also race day, so you also have to think like, how am I going to break this down? I'll explain to you how I like to break down the half marathon. I like to think every 6 miles is an hour or about 45 minutes, depending on how fast you're running, right? So I like to think the first 6 miles doesn't even matter. In my opinion, that's how I like to think about it. I'm like, the first 6 miles, I'm not even worried about it. I'm trying to focus on mechanics and how I'm feeling. Now, from 6 to 10, this is where I'm really allowing myself to propel and get my momentum. If I feel like it go a little bit faster, I'm going to go a little bit faster. But once you get to mile 10, you have 3 more miles left. And this is where you really start navigating, well, do I need to go a little bit faster because I can push it? Or do I need to just stay at this pace? And I often tell people it's better to stay at that pace and knowing that you have to run that last mile with that 0.1 to really give yourself that effort bout. And a lot of times when you're feeling that buffering and that feeling of fatigue and you feel like your legs are getting heavy, I always say pain is just a subjective feeling. It's that pain, that feeling that you have is not going to last forever. It's going to go away, right? So can you suck up this pain and understand that you got to be able to visualize yourself being able to finish? Visualize yourself crossing that line, right? And getting to your end goal. And this is the most important thing, in my opinion, when you're thinking about a race, is you have to visualize already those mental spots where you're going to get pushed at. Don't let it be a surprise when you get to mile 10 and you start feeling fatigue, because that's going to be the first time you living that moment. You're going to be like, oh my God, I'm feeling my body's slowing down. I'm feeling my legs being beat. But if you let that be the first moment, it's probably going to take you by surprise. But if you mentally practice that, you know, you're like, hey, look, there's going to get to a point where my body's going to want to fight back against what I'm forcing itself to do. So let me talk myself into pushing myself harder. And I think this is a great thing to do that you are capable of capitalizing on, is visualizing yourself getting to that point. And when you get to that point, like, okay, I thought about this. I was already in this mental spot before I even got here. This is nothing new to me. Let's go. I got this. Right? So it's how you speak about yourself. You have to understand that you can have the biggest crowd. You can have the biggest motivators. But if you can't be your biggest fan, then it's going to be very difficult, right? I always say, you know, you can't be your worst enemy and your best friend. You have to choose. You either talk bad to yourself and make you feel yourself a certain way, or you're your best friend and you motivate yourself going through something hard like that. And it's at the end of the day, how are you going to feel after? Are you going to feel proud of yourself? Is this what you're going for? Is this what we want to go for? Right? And this is how I like to think of things when I'm talking about the mental preparation to how to finally get there. So some key thoughts, and just to close up this, is environment. Are you training in the cold? Are you training in the heat? And training in the cold is completely different. How much humidity it is. It is the race day. How early are you getting up? How are you capitalizing on the times of training? Are you training early in the morning? Is that better for you? Are you a morning person? Can you squeeze it in during lunch? Can you do it after work? Only you know that. I don't know that. Only you know that. What I would say also too is the pacing portion too. Understanding when is it to go? When do I need to slow down? If you're running when you're running a PR, you have to think about, wow, maybe I'm running a time that I'm not used to running, but I feel really good right now. Don't even second guess it. Go for it. If your body's telling you, I feel good right now, and I don't even think about this pain, keep going, right? So, for example, I'm not a person that often runs those 7-minute miles back to back, but those last 3 miles I was able to run at 7-minute miles. And I surprised myself. I was like, well, I'm here. I'm hitting these numbers. It's a surprise to me, but let's keep going. We're already here. Let's keep pushing. Let's see where we can make it at. The pain threshold. And the pain threshold, yes, there's pains and there's injuries, but understand the difference between both of them. And the most important part, in my opinion, besides the practice, is the mental repetitions, the mental practice. Are you mentally already thinking about crossing that line? Are you excited to cross that line? Understand that the body doesn't know the difference between fear and excitement. So you either feel that fear and you allow yourself to fight fear, or you say, I'm excited actually to get to that finish line. So what are you using as motivation in that standpoint, right? So to anybody at Random Miami 305, shout out to you. We're going to be doing that as a gym next year. I'm excited. We had a great group. We like to do these runs every Sunday. We'll probably meet up and we do some runs. We also do beach workouts and track workouts throughout the month, and we implement them. But come in November, we kind of start picking it up again. So it's exciting just to see everyone that came out and did it. If you were part of that run and you're watching this video, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of myself, but I'm proud of everyone. I can't tell you as a gym owner, being able to see people just put in work and see the outcome at the end. It was amazing. And then I get to train other clients, and other clients are now getting that itch, and they're telling me, hey, you know what? That run looked really nice. And I'm like, yeah, it looks better with you in it. So how about you start training with us next year? So it's always exciting, man. And I always tell people, you don't know what you're capable of. When people tell me like, oh, I don't know if I can do it. Well, do you want to keep living in an I don't know space? I mean, because you don't know that space. That space doesn't belong here. It's not a real space. Or do you want to make it a reality? Right? So it's our perspective, and it's how you approach things. So um, if you don't know, if you're watching this video, you finally get to a point where you run a maybe half marathon or Miami marathon, you need preparation or you need training for it, contact me, send me a DM, and let's get to work. And if not, you know where I stay at in Miami, in Vivo Strength. We're really doing amazing things. So happy with the result that we had this weekend. Everyone PR'd, which is crazy. But yeah. All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you so much for your support. Like and subscribe. Show me some love.